everybody. Welcome back to RoguesCast. Bumblure and Nosidda here.
Hello.
And today we wanted to talk about streaming video games.
Yeah, so streaming I've been seeing a lot of stories about is streaming the future of games. Like basically, like not streaming like to like
Twitch, yeah.
like Twitch. Like that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about like PlayStation Now, like getting your games through like a Netflix style service.
Mm-hmm. Getting beamed directly into your head from some game developer company.
So this is something that's already being done by two companies right now. Those being PlayStation Now and what was it? Origin Access?
I believe so, yeah.
I think it was called, Origin Access is what it was called. So both Sony and EA are doing this. And everybody's saying that this is essentially the direction that gaming is going, and this is essentially going to be basically the death knell of video game consoles, dedicated gaming consoles, as we can just play a lot of our high-end games on like our phones and tablets and stuff like that. So I wanted to talk about it and see what your thoughts were.
Well, it's interesting because it's kind of like cutting out the middleman. Mm-hmm. Because if EA has their own servers and it's just handled like through PC, then you wouldn't have to worry about a console like actually playing the game.
Right.
Like you would be able to get a more direct cut for your money of what people buy that game for.
Yeah, and I can definitely see the benefits of it because it also means like, oh, I don't have to download the game. I can just stream it directly and just play the game.
It's immediately available.
It's immediately available in a Netflix style. It's like you don't have to download anything. You don't have to buy anything. You subscribe to a service and you have access to a huge library of games that you can access instantly.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple of huge distinctions though between doing this and Netflix and those kind of services. Is one, Netflix can also be done on your phone, which most cell phone plans have unlimited data. So that makes it convenient and portable. And you can also view it on like a PC or a console or something, so you can get very high resolution on your TV at home very easily.
Yes.
Consoles don't necessarily have that kind of portability besides the Switch, but they aren't streaming their games, so that's kind of a moot point. So that brings us to you have to have either a hardwired internet connection or try and stream through Wi-Fi.
Yeah, and that's where I come into an issue because I get it. It's a good idea. It's a really good idea. And I'm on board with this idea.
I wouldn't call it good. I would call it interesting.
Well, no. It is a good idea because, I mean, the general comparison is, hey, if it works for movies and TV, why can't it work for games? So I get the mindset there. And I do think it's a good idea. But, however, there are some big problems with trying to incorporate it now. Mm-hmm. And the biggest problem that I have with wanting to stream games is internet speeds.
Yeah.
The internet has not caught up to where gaming is at all.
And it's kind of an area by area basis for that. Because like if you're in a densely populated major city area, you probably have access to fiber optic or really, really good like cable speeds.
Yeah. And those kinds of speeds that are like a gigabit per second, which are absolutely insane. Like with speeds like that, you can download like freaking Battlefield 5 in minutes, you know?
And like if you live in maybe even just a suburban area, you probably have access to decent speeds. Mm-hmm. We're talking about people out in the middle of nowhere, either because of work or finances or something. They aren't in these densely packed areas that have been heavily invested in by these internet companies, or like just other areas that it's darn near impossible to run cable to those areas for them to get internet access that's stable. So they have to rely on something like satellite.
Yeah, so I was actually going to say that based on the research that I've done, most people still don't have the proper internet speeds that would be ideal for streaming games.
Did they say that what speeds would be ideal for streaming video games?
We're like I would probably say like in my personal experience, the ideal speeds would be probably like around 100. to get like the best experience. However,
I personally have access to a fourth of that.
Yeah, so now these are my concerns. However, I do want to share this because you and I have the exact same internet speeds. We've talked about that before. You and I both have Sudden Link, and we both have internet speeds of 24 megabits per second down and 2 megabits per second up. Those are our internet speeds that both of us have.
It's literally the best offered in the area.
Yeah, these are the best speeds that we are able to get. So, I came to find out one day I was at home and I was really caught up on a lot of work and I didn't really have anything to do, and I was still waiting for some games to come out, so I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for the day. And I found out that PlayStation Now actually gives you a free 7-day trial. I was just like, that's interesting. I'm going to activate it and see how it runs.
Okay.
I'm gonna try it, and see how well it runs on 24 megabit per second speeds, and see if it's really as bad as I think it's going to be. And I went into it honestly thinking that it was going to be absolutely terrible. I was going to freaking hate it. That's what I went into it 100% expecting, because my internet speed, in my opinion, is not fast enough for streaming freaking games. So even though that Sony advertises like you need at least 10 megabits per second down to get a decent experience with streaming PlayStation Now, I still had a hard time believing that, because that minimalist kind of perspective is kind of like, oh, as long as you meet the minimum spec requirements on a PC game, it'll run perfectly fine, even though, yeah, it'll run like shit.
No.
Yeah, exactly. So that was my expectations. Like, even though they're saying 10, I'm expecting the real ideal to be more like 30 or 50. And with me having 24, I was like, this is a good situation to test it out.
Okay.
So I booted up my 7-day trial, and I had a look at some games that they had. And I decided to try out two. I decided to try out Borderlands 2, one of my favorite shooters of all time.
Okay.
And Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, another one of my favorite games of all time.
Both of those are a little bit older, but...
Yeah, well, that's one of the issues I have with PlayStation Now, is that it's mainly PS3 games right now.
Okay.
There's some PS4 games on there, but it's a lot, like, it's essentially like 80% PS3 games. But I booted up Borderlands 2. And I was actually very shocked at how well it ran on my internet speed.
Did you have like any intermittent hiccups or?
There was one hiccup that I had throughout the entire hour that I played that game. I had one little hiccup. It was during a fight with a couple of bully monks. But it lasted for like only a second, and then it went right back to smoother gameplay, and I didn't have any more hiccups after that.
Okay.
And there was almost no gameplay lag, meaning like input lag, I mean to say. There was almost no input lag from what I could tell. So the game was running very smoothly. Obviously, the game didn't look at its best. The resolution was downscaled.
Okay, so you weren't able to play it at like best quality.
It was streaming at like 720p.
Okay.
It basically looked like a 720p video would look like on like a YouTube video or something.
Okay.
So it looked acceptable. It was an acceptable like way it looked. It didn't look at its best, which is expected.
And that's something that just seems kind of counterintuitive, at least for me, is because Xbox and especially Sony, their systems are graphic powerhouses. They're supposed to look good.
Yeah, and I'm about to get to that, but like, despite the fact that the game was down, like, the graphics weren't downscaled. It was the resolution that was downscaled.
Yeah. So it might have some like pixelation.
Exactly. It had like the pixelation wasn't that noticeable. It was mainly noticeable around like dialogue text. Like whenever dialogue text came up in the game, that's when I noticed
soft.
It was the text looked soft and the UI looked soft, but everything else looked fine. Okay. It was an acceptable resolution. But that was expected. I wasn't really expecting it to be like, looking like super high-end 1080p to 4K or something like that. That's not what I was expecting. I was expecting like a lower resolution, because streaming stuff is compressed. It's natural that it's going to look more filtered. So I was more concentrated on how often was it going to hiccup, and was the gameplay going to be smooth. And again, like I said, I played that game for an hour, only had one little hiccup that lasted a second, and for the rest of the hour, the gameplay was smooth, like butter smooth.
Okay. Are you playing on a hardwire connection?
It wasn't a hardware connection, admittedly. So now what I did do is with Oblivion, I actually unplugged my Ethernet purposely, and I connected my PS4 to Wi-Fi.
Okay.
So then I booted up Oblivion, started a new game, and I played it for an hour on Wi-Fi. And not a single hiccup.
Okay.
Not even one. Again, the game looked like it was downgraded and it was lower resolution. Again, expected. But the game ran smooth.
Is the router that you used in the same room as the console?
Yes, it was.
Okay, so it was close.
Yeah, it was close. So that probably had something to do as to why it was running so good. But even so, even if the router's in the same room, hardwire's always the better option.
Yeah.
But I tested Oblivion out with a Wi-Fi connection, even though the router was in the same room, just to see if there was any difference.
Yeah.
And not only did I notice no difference, but this time there was no hiccups at all.
Okay.
So I was actually very surprised at how good PlayStation Now ran. Would I subscribe to it? Hell no. Because $20 a month is too much money for what is essentially a service that is basically just a PS3 service. So it has a lot of development to go. I think it needs to be cheaper, and it needs to offer a lot more modern games.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I was very impressed with how it ran. However, I think that before streaming games like this becomes more mainstream, faster internet speeds need to become more commonplace.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was very surprised at how well it ran on a 24 megabit per second speed, but it also got me thinking how much better this would be running if it was on a higher speed connection.
Because then you could actually stream it at a higher resolution too.
Exactly. So that's where I'm kind of at now. I'm also the kind of person who likes to play games at like their best. So even if streaming was an option, and this is actually kind of where I wanted to go, is that I still want a download option. Like, I would still really like a download option.
And there's no real downside in terms of the developer, because if you're physically downloading it, then it's up to the consumer to make sure they have enough memory for the game. So there's no cost for the developer, unlike a physical copy where you have to actually have the discs burned and manufactured and make packaging and ship it all around and pay for shelving and advertisement space in retail stores and all kinds of stuff that go with releasing physical copies. So streaming or digital downloads offer the same benefits.
Now, I definitely think that physical games are still going to be here to stay for at least a pretty decent amount of time still. The reason why is because faster internet speeds that are needed for digital distribution and streaming are not as commonplace as we need it to be.
And control over that isn't in game developers' hands. That's
exactly.
in internet service providers' hands.
Yeah, I mean, as crazy as this might sound to a lot of people, the U.S. still has plenty of places where data caps are still a thing.
Yep.
And I like that. Somehow that's a shocker to some people. But you want to know something that's even more shocking than that? There are still some places in the United States where dial-up is still the only option.
Yep.
They don't even have access to satellite. Only dial-up.
Mm-hmm. And it's just because like ISPs, like they aren't going to run new line to that area because even at higher speeds, they may not get their money back out of the investment.
Yeah, exactly. But like that's what I'm talking about. Like nobody, like everybody thinks that dial-up is completely dead. No, there's still some dial-up places out there. And for those of you who don't know, dial-up is the internet where when it's loading up, it's going. Remember that shit?
Yeah, I remember sacrificing goats to the internet gods. Well, I mean, just like a couple of years ago before I moved to where I'm living now, I would regularly go and help the retired people that live next door with any computer problems that they had, because it's just they didn't grow up with computers. So
yeah,
I would just take 5 minutes, help them with a simple issue, and they still had dial-up. Mm-hmm. And I mean, they were even using a little computer service to where if somebody called them while they were on the internet, it wouldn't lock up the phone line. They could still, get the answering machine to answer it.
Yep.
And so it's just like, there are still people out there using it. Now, most of them I would probably assume aren't gamers, but some of them probably are, not by choice, but out of necessity.
So I would probably say, like, there's still a need for physical copies, and there's still going to be a need for physical copies, because I hear a lot of people saying, oh, the next consoles won't have disk drives. Yes, they will. Yes, they will. They will have disk drives. I guarantee
it. Would probably cut down on the size of the freaking things if it didn't have a disk drive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even if the new consoles don't have a disk drive, they're at least going to pull a Nintendo Switch and go with cartridges.
Well, the other thing I'm thinking of is if they get rid of the disk drive, then wouldn't that mean they wouldn't be able to play Blu-rays and DVDs as well?
Yeah, but a lot of people wouldn't think that that's... a lot of people who argue that consoles should get rid of disk drives argue that that's not a necessary feature either, because everybody just streams their stuff.
That's true, but it is convenient.
Yeah, exactly, because I just want to take a moment to just acknowledge how incredible it is that people are actually now starting to consider Blu-ray to become dead. Like, it's not completely dead, but a lot of people are saying it's a dying format, and I just like, it feels like it was just yesterday that it was like the most relevant format in the world.
Yeah.
I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that. It's just like, my God, technology evolves fast.
Well, it's just, to be perfectly honest, I would imagine, because a lot of those Blu-rays and DVDs are they're shipping with like a digital copy included, and you just plop that on whatever jump drive you want and just load it up that way.
Yeah, Game of Thrones was the same way. I bought all the Blu-ray packs, and they all come with a digital copy you can get.
Mm-hmm. But that's a different industry, so
yeah, that's a different. Well, I mean, it kind of ties into what we're talking about with the whole streaming thing, because the reason why it's so relevant, with the whole idea that streaming is the future of gaming, is the fact that physical media at some point in the future won't be relevant, in that we're just going to be downloading our games, or we're just going to stream them, know, and that's like the whole point. So the idea that physical games are kind of going away is kind of relevant to that conversation, which I definitely disagree that consoles are going to be getting rid of physical media anytime soon.
There's a lot of up and downs.
Yep, there's a lot of
between those. And so this was a question I wanted to ask about you telling about your experience. How were the load times?
Load times were pretty much the same as they always were. Like with Borderlands 2 especially, like the loading times were not really any different.
Mm-hmm. You're still limited by your hardware.
Exactly. And the hardware that is running the Borderlands 2 and Oblivion is PS3 hardware, because they're the PS3 versions. It's just that they're running the PS3 version from a server somewhere that's running PS3 hardware.
Yeah.
Now, the entire reason why they did it that way is because the PlayStation 3 had such unique hardware with the cell architecture that there was no way they could make the PS4 backwards compatible without
emulate it.
But yeah, they couldn't even emulate it because the cell architecture is so unique. Like, they would have had to build that architecture into the PS4 to make it backwards compatible. It's like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
So I understand why because PlayStation Now was originally just supposed to be kind of like if you want to play PS3 games on the PS4, now you can. Mm-hmm. That was originally their answer for that. But now PlayStation Now has kind of become their statement of, this is the future of gaming. And I see that happening in the long run, but just not anytime soon. Just because I still think that internet technology still has a long way to go. So I think that I will say, when it comes to subscription services, I like Microsoft's, the Xbox Game Pass, because you download the games. And there's always going to be a place for people who want to play games at their top quality. And that's why I don't think like streaming games is going to be the death knell of consoles like people are saying.
I highly doubt it.
I highly doubt that, because streaming games to like a phone or a tablet is convenient, but there's always going to be a market of people out there who want the best looking versions of the game that's running on local hardware, and there's always going to be an audience for that. And I think that what I see happening is a service like PlayStation Now existing, and like you can stream games to like your phone, tablet, computer and stuff, but there'll still be a PlayStation console where you can either stream it but also have the option to download it. Mm-hmm. I can see that happening, and I definitely see Xbox doing that.
And I I personally prefer the download option just because, like, if you only stream your games, if your internet ever goes out, then you can't play the game.
Which is a problem for me because the internet goes out at my place a lot. So.
Mm-hmm. And again, that's out of the game developer's hands, but that's still a factor.
Yeah, it's still a factor. It's still a problem that needs to be addressed.
So what would be one major like issue and one major strength for streaming for you?
For me personally, let's say that there's... Okay, here's a good example. So let's say there's a game that I'm just kind of somewhat curious about. I'm not really excited about it. I just want to play it and try it out for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want to pay like $40 to get the game. I'm probably just going to wait for it to get a lot cheaper and just try it out.
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft or Sony can come in and say, oh, you're interested in that game? You're not super excited about it, but you just kind of want to try it, right? Well, tell you what, for $10 a month, you get access to that game and so many others, and you can download or stream as many of them as you want, and you don't have to buy them. You can just try them out for yourself. And if you want to buy your own digital copy, you can.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, that would be appealing to me because like there's so many games out there that I want to play, that I want to experience, but I'm waiting for them to get cheaper.
Yeah. And I could easily see that even spinning off into like, okay, you want to try the game? We'll let you stream the game with a time limit as like a demo. So like you can stream it for like an hour, and once your hour is up, then you're locked out of it until you buy it.
Yeah, and I can see that happening. I want to... That's actually a really good idea. Like,
it's like a try it before you buy it.
Yeah, give players like access to the game for like the full game for 3 hours, and after that 3 hours is up, you're locked out of the game until you purchase it.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can decide for yourself if you want. Excuse me, I had a hiccup there. If you could decide for yourself that if you want to buy the full copy or not and keep playing. And you know what? That's what happened. That's what happened for me with Nier Automata, because I was interested in this game called Nier Automata, which is kind of like an action JRPG.
Mm-hmm.
For the PS4, and I wanted to try it out. It looked cool, but I wanted to try it out first. Well, as it turns out, there was a demo available for it on the PSN store. So I downloaded the demo, and I played it, and I really enjoyed it. And I was like, this is really awesome. And at the end of the demo, they're like, if you want to keep playing the game, you can buy your own copy right here. I'm just like, I like what I played. Heck yeah, I want to buy a copy.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought a copy of the game.
At that point, you're letting the game speak for itself.
Yeah, and I think I like that idea of like, that's one thing about streaming that I can get on board with, where they can say, try the game out, and then if you like it, you can buy it.
Yeah, because then at that point, you're actually seeing what the product is instead of relying on like pre-rendered cutscenes and other advertisements that are not true to what the gameplay actually is.
Exactly, because in the current game market right now, the only way you can really experience a game at all is if you actually just freaking pony up the money to buy it. And if you don't like it, tough shit.
Mm-hmm.
You bought the game. The games are not usually refundable.
Yeah. Depending on where you get them.
It depends on where you get it from. But I mean, like Best Buy, for example, I know like they have this policy where like once the wrapping on a game is opened up, you can't return it.
Mm-hmm.
So
and it's because then at that point they would be taking a hit.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
resell it and stuff, and it's just, but that's neither here nor there. So
yeah.
But yeah, I think that in terms of using it as an advertisement thing to promote a game like with a limited trial time, I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah, because Octopath Traveler did that.
Mm-hmm.
Because Octopath Traveler came out and said, hey, before the game comes out, you can try the game out with this demo, and you can pick any one of the 8 characters that you want. There are only 2 restrictions. You only have 3 hours to play the game, and you cannot leave the opening area.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Those are your only 2 restrictions, but your progress will carry over if you decide to buy the game.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people, because there was another story that we might touch on in a future podcast where Octopath Traveler was like sold out everywhere because Nintendo and Square Enix couldn't anticipate the sales. And I think a big reason for that is because of the demos.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a different story. We might touch on that in another podcast.
So with streaming, like you wouldn't even have to download it, so you wouldn't have to worry about how much memory you have on your console, or have to worry about getting an external hard drive for your console. It would immediately be available to where you could try it, and then you can also decide if you want to buy it or not. I think that would be a brilliant idea.
That is a brilliant idea, and I would be 100% on board with that, because, like, yeah, in my opinion, streaming the game, at least for right now, is not the ideal way for me to play games. But if I want to try a game before I buy it, sure, I'll stream it. That's perfectly fine. It's a pretty good way of trying out the game without downloading it, and then at the end of the hour or 2 hours that I'm allowed to play the game, they say, hey, that's it. If you want to keep playing the game, you can buy your own copy that you can either stream or download to your console and play it locally. And I think would be a really good way to do it. I think that'd be a huge benefit for streaming.
Now, here's the part where I'm going to rip streaming and video games a new one.
Okay, go ahead.
There are a bunch of potential glaring issues with it.
Yep, and I kind of know where some of them are.
One thing that you mentioned in your when you like test ran the streaming stuff, you're the only one using that internet, if I remember correctly.
Pretty much.
There have been times, because we have the same internet plan, I'll be playing Overwatch and my wife decides to do something or needs to do something for work or whatever, and then I start getting lag out of nowhere and I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
If you are sharing your internet plan and you have a limited internet like speeds and you share that household and that internet with other people, it can be a nightmare.
And that's where I was saying before that in order to get an ideal experience with it, in a realistic situation, you would have to have a faster speed than what I have or what you have. Because here's the thing, 24 megabits per second will technically work with PlayStation Now and streaming the games, but but like when I did my example, as you said, I am literally the only person using that internet connection. If I had family there who was also using that internet, it probably would have had a lot more hiccups.
Yep.
I guarantee you that would have been the case. I think a big reason why it ran so smoothly is because it was that streaming was literally the only activity that internet was doing.
Yep. You mentioned another one that I wanted to talk about, data caps.
Data caps are still a big problem.
Streaming video games will eat a ton of data because streaming movies eats a ton of data.
Well, it's not just that. Like, streaming movies does eat up a lot of data, but games are way more intense than movies. Because with movies, yeah, they're intense, but it's still just a video. It's essentially just a video file that you're streaming. A game is literally you streaming an entire piece of software.
Yep.
That is way heavier.
Not
on the
only
internet
has
speed.
to communicate with your system, but also communicate back with the server that it's running on, so it can detect your inputs.
Exactly. Whereas
so it's not just using your download; it's also reliant on your upload speeds.
Exactly. So that's where I see that becoming a problem. And like I said, I do like the idea of streaming. It's a convenient feature, but in order for it to be truly utilized, internet's going to have to come a long way.
Yeah.
And internet has not caught up yet. I mean, there's a lot of ground that still needs to be covered in advancing internet forward, which there's some attempts to make it happen. But we're just not there yet.
Yeah. Stability of ISPs, because whenever you're in high traffic times or you're approaching your data cap, you may get throttled. Your internet speeds may get throttled. And then at that point, you're not enjoying the game because it's lagging or bouncing around or it's just hiccuping because your internet speed just is bouncing around.
Exactly.
And it's just that's just another problem that it's not necessarily the game developer's fault, but that's something that has to be considered.
Yep. There also needs to be more competition in the ISP market too. I still think that's a problem.
So another thing that we've talked about is access to the internet. You have to be on the internet for those games to be available.
Constantly.
So if your internet goes out or you forget to pay the internet bill or you're trading internet providers and they haven't gotten a technician out to you yet, you do not have access to those games.
Yep, and that's where I think downloading games is a lot more of a better feature, because here's the thing, and I talked about this in our E3 podcast too, but PlayStation 4 has this really handy feature where you can set your PlayStation Network's account's primary PlayStation 4 system, and your account can only have one primary PS4, just one. And whatever primary PS4 your account is set to, once you have downloaded your digital copies to that primary PS4 of games, even if you do not have an internet connection, you can still play your games as long as it is on your primary PS4. You do not have to be connected to the internet to play them. So if your internet goes out, you can still play them as long as it's your primary PS4. Whereas if I logged into your PS4, into my account and downloaded one of my games and started playing it, your PS4 is not my primary PS4. So if the internet here goes out, I can't play it anymore.
Yep.
But on my primary PS4, that's not the case. I can keep playing it because it's my primary PS4. And I think that's a feature that is really useful.
That's the thing, is that having a download option that's not reliant on the internet, like you download it and then something goes wonky with your internet, it doesn't affect you. That just empowers the consumer. And I think that's a good idea to have that option available. Like if you want to choose to download it or stream it, I think that should be a choice for the consumer.
I agree 100% on that. And I think that's why I don't think that streaming games is going to be the quote unquote death knell of video game consoles. I still think that video game consoles are going to be around for people who want to download their games. Now,
there are a lot of potential upsides to streaming, and I wanted to go over a couple of those as well. So I already mentioned one. There's no cost for those games to be distributed. All they have to do is get the servers and the server farms and that kind of stuff set up to where people can connect to it and communicate. And that's a different cost than actually advertisement and production. So what then they have there is streaming protects the data of the developer. If you download the game, it is very, very easy, and that's how there's a huge community doing like ROM hacks, like Kaizo Mario and that kind of stuff. We mentioned in another podcast that somebody modded Dragon Ball Fighter Z to have Waluigi in it. I've seen Breath of the Wild on PC with Shrek replacing one of the ogres,
and your paraglider is replaced with Buzz Lightyear,
and so. While I personally think all of these are hilarious and I love them, as a developer, that can be a bit of a nightmare because that's not the intended experience you wanted for your game. If you are streaming those games, you would not be able to easily rip those files and mod them.
Right, and I can see some people seeing that as a downside, but for the developer, it is an upside.
It protects their content.
Right. So that essentially makes it a kind of a form of DRM in a way.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is if you're streaming it, it's easier to make policies and implement those policies in terms of regulating like Let's Plays or live streams and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Now, there is one caveat to that, though, and that is that also kind of means that the consumer kind of loses some of the ownership over their purchase of a game, which in the case of streaming, they're not purchasing the game. They're essentially renting it. So I think if you're renting a game, I think that stuff like that is fine. I don't think that you should have full reign over something that you think belongs to you, because if you're renting a game, it doesn't belong to you. You're renting it.
Yeah.
Now, if you buy a game, I am a believer that at that point, it's yours, and you have every right to do with that game that you want. So like if I buy a game, I don't want to stream the game. I want to download it. It's as simple as that. Because
at that point, you're in control of your experience with that game.
Yeah, because I mean, if I want to buy a Wii U version of Breath of the Wild and then run it on a Wii U emulator and replace Link with Minecraft Steve and replace the paraglider with Buzz Lightyear and replace my horse with Thomas the Tank Engine, that's my own damn business, because I bought the game.
I mean, Elder Scrolls had a ton of mods.
Oh, yeah.
But it's only because those files were then downloaded and stored on your computer that you could then go in and mod those files.
Which, by the way, everything that I just described is on a YouTube video. You can look it up. It's amazing.
But it's just, I can understand from a developer and a consumer why that's favored or not favored. And it's up to personal opinion at that point.
Yeah, my personal opinion is that if I'm just streaming the game through a service that I'm subscribed to, that to me is you're renting a game. And if you're renting a game, fair enough. The developer has every right to have full reign over how I access that game, because the game is not mine to own because I'm renting it.
And that's the other thing I wanted to bring up is if you are streaming a game to your console that is constantly using the internet, if you are a streamer that streams on like Twitch or YouTube or Facebook Live and that kind of stuff, that is extra strain on your internet connection that you will have to account for your bit rate and everything else. So it may be that you have to limit the quality of that and then also limit the quality of your live stream. So then it's just, it's forcing you to double dip, where if you just downloaded the game, you're completely negating one of those things.
Yep, exactly. And I will say though, I mean, I've already kind of said this, but I mean, if I purchase the game in full and download it, at that point, I'm in full favor of saying no, the game's mine. I purchased it, I can do whatever I want with it. But if you're just streaming it via rental, the DRM policies are justified.
Yeah.
So just putting that out there, because I know there's a lot. I'm just putting that out there because I know that there's a big stigma against DRM, which I understand that stigma 100%. But again, if you're just renting the game, it's not yours. It's that simple.
So, but see, the other big strength that I can see with streaming a video game is potentially cutting down on loading times, much in the way that different types of cartridges would.
It's true.
Because like the Switch uses SD cards, I believe.
Well, the Switch uses kind of like a modified version of a SD card for its games.
But because of the way it processes, it cuts down the loading times of a video game drastically compared to a CD. Whereas if you're streaming a game in a modern game, it would be very, very easy for the developer to plan for that and actually program the game to preload stuff in the background, so that way you have a more seamless experience because your internet speed is able to handle that back and forth.
Yep. So there's a lot of upsides and downsides to streaming, and the whole thing with like developers preparing for lower loading times is another big one, because I know loading times is a really big thing, because loading times, regardless of how good the game is, are always annoying. So I think that when it comes to graphics, we're starting to hit that roof kind of.
Yeah.
I think that with the next generation of consoles, they should focus less on how intense the games look and more on what can they do to cut back on some of the big annoyances, like how long it takes for a game to boot up on a system, or how long are the loading times.
A way of life changes.
Yes, way of life changes, exactly. I think that's what the next iteration of consoles should focus on.
4K is pretty much about the max that we're going to be able to get resolution-wise that is going to be relevant to the consumer, because sizes bigger than that are pretty much meant for like movie,
film cinematography,
like theater, like where you're literally projecting on a several foot,
unless you're planning on playing a game in a huge theater, I don't think you need your games to run in 8K.
Actually, I have seen somebody hook up a movie projector to a game console, and it is amazing. So I think what was it? I think somebody hooked up an Xbox and they were playing Halo on at a movie theater, like they did an overnight lock-in. And I will admit that was awesome.
I would do that.
So it's just like that kind of stuff is really cool, but not quite what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's really cool though. I would definitely want to do that.
But until you start getting into like you're doing stuff where you're projecting on your entire freaking wall, 4K is about kind of the cap.
Yeah, because it's again, like you said, unless you're planning on like playing a game on your entire wall or in a movie theater or something like that, you don't need games at 8K.
Mm-hmm.
You really don't. It's kind of silly to even think about. Like, I know it can be done on smaller monitors, but it's really not necessary.
Yeah. So is there anything else you can think of for consoles that would be either a benefit or a detriment to streaming games?
Not necessarily off the top of my head. I'm trying to think of some.
Okay. So let's look now at the alternative systems that use streaming.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean mobile gaming.
Yes. Well, mobile games I know are utilizing a lot more streaming options.
Mm-hmm. Just because cell phones don't have as much memory, and also you may be using those memory for a lot of different apps, music, and other things besides games.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, like, I just personally don't understand the appeal of gaming on smartphones. Just like beyond like maybe the super simple games, but like there's people playing like shooters and full RPGs on their phones.
Well, it's like, if I remember, PUBG and I think Fortnite are on.
Yeah, and
phones.
I'm just sitting there like I can't imagine why people are into that.
And I think
I guess that's just
the
me.
biggest thing is that smartphones are pretty much ingrained as a part of our personality and our being, because it used to be as just like if I had my keys and wallet, that's what I checked for every time I left the door. Now it's
a smartphone.
Phone, wallet, keys.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like the reason why I'm saying I can't imagine is I'm gonna pull up my phone and give you an example. I can't imagine playing my games like this. Mm-hmm. With like I know the audience can't see me doing this right now, but like I have my phone out right now, and I'm like plopping my thumbs all over the screen right now.
Where you have the on-screen
controls, and I'm just like I can't imagine myself doing that. There's no feedback because there's no buttons. On top of that, too, my thumbs are on the screen interrupting what I am seeing.
For a lot of like classic games, like I played a Sonic the Hedgehog on my phone one time, and the joystick sometimes just felt unresponsive, or sometimes I would accidentally swipe the edge of the screen and just like, oh, now my camera's open.
Yeah, like I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I mean, I know mobile gaming has just blown up, but I just personally don't get it.
It appeals to certain people, and I think mainly for them is that it's a very minimal investment, because a lot of app games or games that are on mobile are extremely affordable. Like you're paying maybe $5 tops.
Yeah, I mean, like the most expensive game that I've ever seen on mobile is Nintendo's games. Like Super Mario Run is $10.
Yep.
Like that's the most expensive I've seen.
And so it's something quick to do when you just need to kill a little bit of time before you get to doing the next thing.
Right.
So it's convenient, it's affordable, and it's on something that you already always have on you.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I can see myself like using phone games as just kind of like a quick time killer, but I can't see myself doing something like 5 hours of Monster Hunter on my phone or something like that. Yeah. Like I could never see myself doing that.
It appeals to casual gamers more.
Right. So
that's just what it is.
But I do know that there's a lot of people out there who do like to do what I just described, that being like 5 hours of some kind of dedicated game on their phone, which that's where the streaming aspect comes into play.
And a lot of like phone providers are, I think pretty much almost all of them that I know of are unlimited data now.
Yep.
So you don't have to worry about a data cap, unlike some internet service providers.
Not me though. I still have a data cap.
I feel sorry for you.
I know. Well, like the reason why I have a data cap is because at the job that I work, I get the benefit of having 20% off of my phone plan, but the catch is that it doesn't cover unlimited plans. It has to have a data cap.
Yeah.
But
that was your choice.
Yeah, so I mean I could switch to an unlimited data plan.
But again, you don't really use your phone for that much.
Yeah, like it's not often that I go over that 15 gigabyte limit.
The other option is that, like, I'm assuming when you mostly watch videos on your phone, you're probably at home.
Yeah,
So
usually
you just connect to the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, exactly. Because the most intense thing that I do on my phone is YouTube videos.
Mm-hmm.
I watch a shit ton of YouTube videos on my phone.
Mm-hmm. But there's so many Wi-Fi hotspots, including most people at your home. I would assume most people have a Wi-Fi router because a lot of internet plans that just includes that, or you pay like $10 a month for one, or you can go buy your own.
But it's just funny. It's like there have been multiple times where I'm coming close to reaching that data cap, and I look at what used up the data the most, and usually it's like 85% YouTube.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we were saying earlier. Streaming videos eats up a lot of data.
It does. It eats up a lot of data. I know that because I have a 15 gigabyte data cap on my mobile plan, and I watch a lot of YouTube. So I like, there have been lots of situations where I had to heavily limit what I did on my phone for like a good couple of weeks to ensure that I didn't have to pay extra money.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
So I could potentially see the Switch, because it is a more mobile platform, to potentially use streaming as an advantage if you're connecting to like Wi-Fi hotspots and that kind of thing. But again, I would much rather just get like I think I got like a 256 gigabyte like expansion card for it.
Yeah, I
got
got the same size on mine too.
And I can download a ton of games on there, and then I don't have to worry about connecting to hotspots and stuff to play my games.
And it's not just that either. Like I think Nintendo said that you can get, theoretically, you can get up to 2 terabytes worth of flash memory on a Switch via an SD card if you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that SD cards that large don't even exist yet. So props to Nintendo for actually making that possible.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that if it does exist, it's expensive as heck.
Oh yeah, like, because I know Prime Day just happened recently, and one of the deals that they recently had, I don't think it's available anymore, but you could get a 400 gigabyte micro SD card that would fit the Switch for only $130.
That's not bad.
I was really tempted to buy that. I was very tempted. I didn't do it because I just recently bought the 256 for my Switch, so I was still kind of happy with that. But I was very tempted to get that extra storage because those 400 gigabyte cards are usually like almost $300.
Yeah, and I haven't even begun to even scratch the surface of using the memory on the Switch.
Same with me.
But that's the big thing that I easily see being the leading like factor for the streaming, is that video game sizes are only going to get bigger and bigger as they include more graphics, more content, bigger maps.
Because it's insane how big some of these games are getting.
Yeah,
I've seen some games. There's some games coming out now that are getting as big as fucking 200 gigs.
And
that is fucking insane.
That would pretty much destroy the hard drive on my Switch.
Yeah.
So, as primarily a PC gamer, that's not so much of a problem because I can get hard drives and stuff and slap them in my big tower, and it's not too terribly expensive. Mm-hmm. But for a console, that's a much bigger issue because putting a bigger hard drive makes that console more expensive. And if you fill up that memory, like me and Taylor with our PS4, we have to regularly delete like games and save data and stuff on there because our hard drive's full, and we don't want to fork up the money for an external hard drive for it. Because whenever we play a game, when we're done with it, we'll delete it to make sure we have room for whatever we decide to get next.
Do you have like just the 500 gig that it came with?
I don't know.
Because I know
I didn't buy this PS4. Taylor already had it.
Okay, because I know most PS4s come with the 500 gig. When I bought mine, I actually swapped the 500 gig that was in there for a 1 terabyte. So I actually have a 1 terabyte in there that I put in myself, and even that, like, it's very easy to fill that up.
Yeah, and it's only going to get worse. And so the next generation of consoles, I mean, I could imagine them maybe having a 2 terabyte hard drive in there, because you can get 2 terabyte internal hard drives for like $75.
Yeah, 2 terabyte hard drives aren't that expensive anymore. They're really not. It's just the reason why I haven't upgraded my hard drive on my PS4 is because migrating all my data would be a pain in the ass, and I don't want to do that.
So it's just streaming would completely alleviate that issue because you would the size of the game wouldn't matter because you're just streaming your internet. So instead of relying on how much data you can store locally, It would be how quick can your internet access that game remotely.
Yeah. So I honestly, like, I think we put it best earlier where we said I think they should both, like, offer both options, where a download option and a stream option for the service, because basically take PlayStation Now and Xbox Game Pass and combine them.
Yeah.
Just
because then you're giving your consumer the option of how they want to enjoy your game.
Exactly. And I think that's what the future of gaming is really going to be. And I think consoles are still going to be very relevant for a long time for that reason, because if you're going to download your games, you need the hardware capable of running it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to be a smartphone or a tablet. A smartphone and a tablet is not going to run Battlefield 5. It's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox will.
Yep.
So it's just, it all depends on what your preferences are, what your preference of device is going to be. If you're the kind of person who prefers downloading these games, then obviously you're going to want to invest money into some kind of device that can run those games locally.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that consoles are still going to be around for quite some time, and I think the future of gaming will have streaming. I think streaming is going to have a big place, but I don't think that's going to. I personally don't think that's going to become the only venue of how we get games.
I don't think it's going to reinvent the way we play games. I think it's kind of like how VR didn't reinvent the way we play video games.
Like everybody said it would.
It's going to be another way to consume that content, but it's not going to be mandatory. It'll just be like, if that's the way you prefer to do it, that's your choice.
Exactly. And I think that Xbox Game Pass has it right for the way that things are right now. Like, they don't offer the streaming option yet, but what they have is it's a $10 a month subscription service. You can download as many of those games that they have on there as you want, and they've already promised that any exclusives they come out with will be available on Xbox Game Pass day one.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if I had an Xbox, I would 100% subscribe to that, like in a snap of a finger. I would subscribe to that.
Because they're making it worth it.
Yeah, because they have good game choices on there. It's a download option. It's not being streamed, so plus it's a lot more affordable. It's $10 a month, whereas PlayStation Now is twice that price, and you're streaming. So I think there's going to be a place for both options in the future. And I think what Sony will end up doing is they'll probably lower the price of PS Now at some point, and they'll add a download option. In fact, there's already speculation they'll download a download option because not too long ago, I think about a month ago, somebody spotted in the PlayStation Now menu, they actually spotted like this download option that just kind of showed up out of nowhere, and then it just kind of went away. Like, they saw it, like they saw it pop up for a couple of games, and then it just went away.
They're probably doing some behind the scenes stuff to incorporate that.
They're probably incorporating stuff for that behind the scenes, and that was like an instance where it just kind of leaked out, and somebody happened to take a picture of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is the direction that Sony's going to go. I think Sony's going to add a download option, and I think Microsoft's going to they're going to add a streaming option.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I think they're both going to become a lot more similar. And I think Sony will probably bring down the price of theirs because it's twice the price of Xbox. That's got to be competitive.
If they're going to compete in their similar services, they'll have to.
Yeah. So, but I definitely think we're going down that route of subscription services, Netflix style, of how you get a lot of games. But I don't think it's going to be stream only, as we were talking about. I think it's going to be stream and download.
That's what I feel is what will end up happening, whether it be by choice or by force.
Yeah. So,
but to be perfectly honest, I think doing a subscription service like that where you're streaming or downloading is probably what's going to happen as compared to buying games outright. Because if you're paying a monthly subscription, the developers and the console holders know exactly how much money they're making, as opposed to relying on hypothetical sales before the game comes out.
Well, I think that both options of buying the game outright and subscribing to a service can both coexist.
Yeah, because you're going to see the number of copies physically made if once streaming and downloading digitally has hit much more mainstream,
Sure.
the number of physical copies that are going to be made is going to drop drastically because
Oh yeah, of course.
the cost of those is a lot higher than doing it digitally.
Exactly. And because think about it, like if these subscription service models become a lot more accepted and more mainstream, let's say Sony comes out with their version of Game Pass for $10 a month, where you can download the games on PlayStation. Let's say The Last of Us 3 or whatever comes out, and you can get a physical or digital copy and buy it outright, or you can just download or stream a copy of the game on PlayStation Now. It's like, why would you go out and pay $60 to get the game when you can just play it on the subscription service you already have?
Yep.
So, and now obviously there's going to be people out there who are going to say, I want to support the developer, I want to support this game, I'm going to buy it. And there's benefits to buying a game as opposed to getting it through a subscription service, because when you're getting it through a subscription service, like I said earlier, you're renting it. But when you're buying it outright, it's yours.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is that there's two big things that I think are going to keep cartridges alive. Is one, like just what you said, is that people want to own the actual physical thing and not have something ethereal that may end up disappearing in a poof of thin air. Because if you stop paying that subscription, you don't have access to any of those games.
It's not even just that. It's also just, what if they decide to remove a game that you really like from that service?
Bingo.
Yep.
That's a big one.
That is a really big one. Because, like, let's say
if they decide to like Disney Vault a game and take it away for a while and then re-release it out later, you're stuck.
Yeah, a perfect example is like you and I have our Steam accounts linked together for Family Share, and every time I look at your list of games, I see Dragon Age 2 on there. That was a game that was available on Steam for a while, but they removed it when Origin became more of a thing for EA. But you still have that game, and I can still download it from your account.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's because you bought the game.
Yep.
So it's just like, yeah, like that's a big thing, is that let's say they come out with like Persona 6 on this subscription service, and then for whatever reason it's removed from the service. Well, if you bought your own copy of the game, you don't have to worry about it.
And that's something I would be very, very leery of in the future, is that, like, we know these companies are going after indie developers and trying to get more exclusives to promote their consoles in the future. So what's to say whenever streaming and stuff becomes more mainstream that they pay a developer to allow exclusivity on their streaming service?
Yeah, that's going to end up
and that means they will have to contact Sony and Nintendo and tell them, hey, you need to take this off of your streaming platform because Microsoft just paid us oodles and oodles of money to have it only on theirs.
Yeah, so you're going to see that happening a lot. So I think what the mindset will end up becoming for a lot of people is the subscription model will be a way to try out a lot of games that you're curious about. But if you end up really liking the game and you want to make sure that you can play it again in the future, you'll probably end up buying your own copy.
Yeah.
And the games that you're super excited about that you can't wait for, you're probably just going to end up buying them outright.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people who are tight on money, it's still a good option for them. What I just described is how I would handle it, is like, if there's a game that I'm just curious about and I want to try out, I would probably just download it through my subscription service. And if I really like it and it becomes a huge favorite game of mine, I'll probably just buy a copy of it.
It's just for some people that are trying to save money, they might not want to double dip that bank account.
Exactly. So that's why they're probably going to say, no, the streaming service is plenty good enough for me. Whereas I'm the person who's going to be like, well, if I like the game enough, I'm going to want to buy my own copy.
Yeah. So again, at that point, that decision is yours.
Yep. So it's basically just offering up an option, but I think that streaming and downloading will coexist, and I think that itself will also coexist with buying games outright.
So there's one other thing I wanted to mention before we wrap this up, and this is the other big thing that I think physical copies is kind of like keeping it alive, is collector's editions.
So here's the thing that I think is going to happen. Because collector's editions are not going to go away. regardless of whether physical media exists or not.
I know they also have like the electronic counterpart, the digital deluxe.
Exactly. So what I'm thinking is probably going to happen is you're still going to see the collector's editions exist, but they're just not going to come with a physical copy of the game. They'll just come with a little card with a code on it.
Yeah.
But
so
you
like
still
you'll
get all
the artwork and the models and statues and books or whatever they decide to throw in there.
But you still get all, exactly. You're getting a digital code, but you're still getting all the physical goodies.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's probably going to be the route that they go. And plus, as you said yourself, they're already coming out with digital deluxe editions where you get a whole bunch of bonus content in the game digitally through a digital copy.
Yeah.
So I mean, digital deluxe and digital collector's editions are already becoming a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, heck, even with you mentioned before with Nintendo releasing the Nintendo Switch bundle that included Super Mario Odyssey.
Yeah.
It didn't include a physical copy. It was a digital code.
Yep.
So yeah, it's already happening. So collector's editions will exist regardless. It's just that in the future they're just not going to include a physical copy. It's just going to be a digital
maybe
copy.
a code to link it to the streaming service or something. Because I've done that with Steam before too.
Yeah, you buy a physical copy and you link it to Steam.
Yeah.
I mean, physical copies are definitely on their way out. But that being said, I don't think physical copies are going anywhere anytime soon.
There's always going to be people that prefer a physical copy.
Sure.
It just depends on if developers are going to cater to that, because manufacturing costs may become a huge factor in their business.
Because a lot of people anticipated that this generation of consoles was going to be the generation where physical copies were going to die out and everybody was going to go all digital. That did not happen. The physical copies are still very relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I'm expecting physical copies of games to be to stay relevant for at least another good decade, even more than that. But regardless of how long they stay relevant, physical copies are on the way out.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that there's a lot of things that need to be improved on before it can be a lot more widely accepted for more people.
Agreed.
So internet speeds being the big one. So, but was there anything else we wanted to touch on with this subject?
I don't think so. I think we covered everything.
Yep. So I guess we'll wrap up this subject. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are. Tell us if you agree or if you disagree. We always love to have conversations with you guys. And as I've said in previous podcasts, if you highly disagree with everything that I've said and what he said, and you want to say that we're idiots or something like that, and
there's something we need to be corrected on.
Yeah, I mean, if you just want to correct us on something, feel free to do so. I mean, we're 100% open to disagreeing opinions and hearing another side. So
yeah. So let us know what you think, and we'll see y'all next time.
See you guys next time for another podcast.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.